I'd like to welcome everybody back today, Alabama Care. We are here in Wetumpka, Alabama, and I hope I said that correct.
You did.
With Mrs. Rachel Hughes, and Mrs. Hughes is the director and an advocate with the State of Alabama Client Assistance Program. And at this point, I'd just like to hand it back over and allow you to introduce yourself.
Well, you've said pretty much about all of it. I've been with this agency for almost 25 years. And I roam the whole state of Alabama and really enjoy the opportunity to meet lots of individuals and talk with them and helping them to get from one point to another.
So 25 years, is it, do you have a crew with you, a group of people that work at SACAP with you?
Me. And I have an assistant, part-time assistant that works with me.
That's a lot on your shoulders.
Yes, it is.
Now, you're originally from Alabama?
Yeah, I guess you would say that. My dad was military, so I roamed a lot in the beginning years, and undergraduate at Troy University, master's from Auburn University, and then I've also had some training at the University of Tennessee.
I thought you were going to go Alabama there. I was like, oh, you're hitting all of it. That's too funny. So what exactly is the State of Alabama Client Assistance Program?
I work with people who may have a concern about their vocational rehabilitation program, or if they're involved in an independent living program. We have 3 independent living programs here in the state of Alabama. There's one in Mobile, one in Montgomery, and then there's one in Birmingham. And if anyone is participating in any of those activities, then I can get involved with them. With vocational rehab, it's mainly with the adult program. You know, Alabama Department of Rehab Services, you have early intervention, you have children's rehab, lots of different programs. And I work with the adult program. I don't work with the children's program.
Okay. Now, the adult program, that kicks in at 18 there?
Actually, younger than that. It could be as young as 14. Usually around 16 is more like it.
Okay.
And with WIOA, the Workforce Investment Act, it has also kicked in, working a lot more with youth. And so vocational rehab has been picking that up a lot more and working a lot more with youth.
Yeah. Now, we've had the opportunity to speak with some of ADRS VR personnel, and so it kind of mirrors that then. So as soon as they start working with, the 14 to 16-year-olds, you're right there for assistance as well.
That's correct. That's correct.
And the VR is for helping, train and gain employment, long-term employment there. What is independent living for somebody that might not fully understand that?
Independent living, it may be learning how to use the bus system. It may be learning how to cook. It may be using computer services. A lot of the programs may do some training with computers and just helping them to live independently. And, kind of really based on each individual need. I don't have a lot of complaints with the independent living. I am involved with the SILC, which is the State of Alabama Independent Living Council, and so I am there if they do need someone, and I can talk with them about the vocational rehab services. Sometimes people who are involved with our independent living centers, some of them may not be ready for employment at that time, or they may not want employment. They may just want independent living. And so that's another option for them to be able to do something more with their life.
Mm-hmm. Kind of feeling empowered there if there's something that they're going through and they want some help there with. Now, how many new cases would you say you take on a year?
It varies. I would say anywhere from 40 to 50. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but then I have the whole state of Alabama. Mm-hmm. And just because someone calls in and talks with me, I don't always open a case. I try to get an idea of where they are and what their concern is and talk them through it. Mm-hmm. It may be a situation where I ask them, have you talked with your vocational rehab counselor? Have you talked with a supervisor? If they have asked for a service and vocational rehab has turned them down, trying to help them to understand why it was turned down. Maybe vocational rehab doesn't understand the request that they're making, and maybe the consumer hasn't explained exactly what they want. And so that's kind of where I come in, and I'm able to talk with the consumer, talk with vocational rehab, get case material, and I can look at the whole scenario, and then I can ask thousands of questions to make sure that we all get on the same page.
Yeah, it sounds like a coach when you explain it that way.
That's exactly right.
It's like bringing a team together for a common solution.
Yeah, that's right.
So even though you say 40 or 50 open cases, it sounds like maybe a lot of the calls come through and it's like, hey, you might want to try this and that'll resolve it. And it doesn't have to be a full open case there.
That's right.
Which I think is really cool. And that could come in the form of, hey, I recommend you get in touch with this organization or tweak this a little bit.
Sometimes you have people that call in that say, I don't really want to work. I need my electricity bill paid. I need food. What can I do? How I need some help.
Yeah.
And so giving them suggestions to get some help in those lines. A lot of times you hear client assistance program, and a lot of people think that it's money that's going to be there to help them. And I have to explain, no, that's not what I do. Although, if that's what you're seeking, I can make some suggestions on where you can go to get those things. Because until they can get their basic needs met, they're not going to want employment. They may not need to go and get employment at that specific time. They may need to take care of some issues that's on their shoulders at that particular time.
Yeah, you got to build that base. You can't.
To interrupt you, I hate to
Yes.
interrupt you for quick, but we're not on Facebook's not up.
Okay.
At least it's not showing up on the computer.
Just 1 second here. Let's go to Alabama Care page.
It says that we're streaming, but it's not showing that it's up on Facebook.
That is correct. I do not see it. We're still recording, so don't worry about that. We've got all this good stuff here. Thank you for stopping me.
I want to double check, make sure it just wasn't my phone.
Save and close. We will stop streaming. Yes. And don't forget where we were talking because we're just going to jump right back in.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a second this time.
I think it picked it up that time. Yeah, we're on. We're good.
Okay, I'm just going to double check through the phone. Well, I don't see it on the phone yet.
Just pulled up on it on the computer here.
I'm going to double check.
Okay.
You've got it on the...
Yeah, I got it on the computer. We're live.
All right, that'll work. So we were just talking about... Now I forgot.
Basically, when consumers call in and they're wanting services, sometimes they're needing monetary means, and I can't help them with that. And so I might give them some suggestions on how they can get those needs met.
And that's type of a thing where it may take some coaching and a lot goes back on the shoulders of the individual. Like, hey, these resources are out there, but
Yeah.
I can't walk you hand in hand through each one of these. I can help empower you, to find those things out. But then there are some cases where you will walk hand in hand
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
I do a disability expo every year, and we just finished our 4th year. And that expo is specifically to bring in resources and do a directory so that our community knows. And since I'm from the Montgomery area, that's where we do it, and it encompasses Wetumpka, Ottawaville, all those areas there. And of course, vocational rehab, Easter seals, all those people are included in this. And then they walk away with a book. And so this is still the same thing. When people call me, they're looking for resources. And a lot of times I can pull out that book if it's local and give them information on who to contact.
Now, how is SACAP? Am I saying that right? SACAP?
Yes, that's correct.
How is SACAP funded?
We are federally funded, and every year when I have completed my annual report, which is December, it has to be completed at the end of December, then I get my funding. Actually, I get a little bit starting in October, and then I get the rest of it after that. And every agency, I'm a very small agency. Alabama is not compared to some of, California, some of the larger areas. And so my money is not as great. And at one time when I first started the client assistance program, there was my director at that time. And then I did most of the advocacy. And then when he retired, I took on the whole thing. And it's just me. But my funding has dwindled a little bit. And so I can only hire a part-time secretary. And I love my technology. I love my phone, love my computer, because it helps me to get my work done along the way.
Technology, you said it earlier, when it's working, it's great.
Yeah.
But the little kinks, they add up there. Now, you mentioned before we went live that SACAP really came out of a bill that came through the federal government there.
Well, yes, with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and that's where the client assistance program was funded. And they said that consumers who are part of this program need to have someone that they can talk to if they're not getting the services or if there's something that's, they need help with.
Yeah.
And so that's how that advocacy began.
Back in 73, you said.
Yes.
That reminds me, when you explain it that way, of ADAP
Yes.
in Tuscaloosa being federally funded.
That's correct. We are a sister agency, and we're a little bit different in that I handle vocational rehab, independent living, anything like that. And then ADAP, they'll handle school systems when people are not being treated fairly in the school or not getting services, maybe mental health, maybe if they're not getting the services they need. So they cover some of those things. They're going to do more of the lawyer type things that they have to go in and fight in court. I don't do that. What I do is a very basic, I go in and meet with a vocational rehab counselor, meet with a supervisor. We try to get all on the same page and get everything solved. If we are not able to get it solved, you want to know what happens next.
Mr. Tucker.
Yeah. What happens next is there are other things that they can do. They can ask for an administrative review. And at that time, when they do that, they'll send their request to the supervisor saying, and I'm not in agreement with this, and I would like an administrative review. And vocational rehab chooses 2 supervisors from other units to come in, look at the case, and talk with the consumer. And then they'll rule on that situation. There's also mediation that they can do. And they have a mediator that comes in and tries to mediate between the consumer and vocational rehab in order to kind of basically do what I have already done, but it is taken up a notch.
It's just kind of an extra step. We'll try it again.
Yes, we'll try it again. And I feel like I do a lot of that in working with consumers and vocational rehab is if there are doors that close, how can we open that door? And I know the commissioner for the Alabama Department of Rehab Services, Jane Elizabeth Burdishaw, one of the things that she has implemented since she has become the commissioner is how to get to yes. And that's kind of the same thing when you do mediation is how do you get to yes, and you're trying to help the consumer to get the things that they need, but also follow the rules and regulations of the Rehabilitation Act and what rehab can and can't do. So that navigates where you can go with that. And then the very last thing is a fair hearing, and that's done with a hearing officer. We've got 5 in the state of Alabama, and the consumer will pick a hearing officer with the assistance of the lawyer for the Alabama Department of Rehab Services, and then they'll have kind of like a court.
Do you feel like some people will come and think that it's a one-stop shop for all the answers, and you kind of have to coach them, like as a consumer, you kind of have to coach them like, hey, this organization will help in this aspect, but they're not going to take care of everything for you.
Yes, that is correct. Sometimes consumers, there are some things that they feel like they need, and I can give you an example. For instance, let's say that somebody comes in and say, they need transportation, and they say, can you buy me a Cadillac? That's not going to happen.
Well, now that I'm here, can you buy me?
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. But can we sit down and look at what the needs are of that consumer, and look at modes of communication? It may be getting a bus pass. It may be paying for vocational rehab, to pay for someone to take them to meetings, such as going for interviews, maybe going, if they're going through training, maybe going to Easter seals, to drive them, to get them there and get them back home. Mm-hmm. So we just have to be able to sit down and think out of the box sometime and come up with an idea of what would be best for them. And when you're considering the whole state of Alabama, where you have rural areas and you have areas that are in the city, of course, you're going to have better modes of communication and transportation, whereas out in the small areas,
an hour outside of Montgomery.
That's right. And so you may have to get really creative of how can we do this.
So what is an example of being creative an hour outside of Montgomery? What does that look like for transportation?
A lot of times, I know transportation is a very big discussion, period, because a lot of our consumers don't have transportation. They don't have cars. It may be getting a family member, paying a family member to take them where they need to be. It may be maybe another consumer who needs a little bit of extra money to help them do what they want to do. Maybe paying them. Maybe they have transportation, but they don't have the money.
Yeah. So
it may be paying them so much of mileage is what vocational rehab does, is pay the mileage to help them get to where they're going. And then that can help them as well.
Yeah, I like that peer support there. If there's somebody else in the area that has transportation that understands, the scenario in the community, that's a perfect fit.
Something else that has just passed in law is that, and they were wanting to do this, maybe churches or other means that have
like bigger buses, vans.
Yes, them being, it would be okay now for them to pick up someone and take them to an appointment, maybe to a doctor's appointment, or maybe take them for a job interview.
Yeah.
And then until maybe we can get them connected with someone else that might be able to help them out if they get this job.
I think that's a great idea, because sometimes I'll go by churches and see a van just sitting there.
That's right.
And it could be, that the church is reimbursed for the mileage and, however that works out, and it'd be additional funding for the church, and it would help the individual get to like doctor's appointments or whatever. It's a win-win all the way around.
That's exactly right. And I think that churches a lot of times are very willing to help if they know if there's a need.
Yeah. And maybe you have to retro some of the vans or something, and, do some extra lifts and what have you.
Right.
But that's a great idea. I never thought of that. So for the age group that you typically work with, it sounds a little bit older, maybe 14 all the way through, as opposed, you're not doing any early intervention stuff.
Right.
Most of the people that you work with are high school and above.
Right, that's correct. And there is no limit to whom I can help. They can be 97 years old. If they are still wanting employment and still going through vocational rehab services, and there have been a few older people that have utilized services, and vocational rehab has been there to help them.
I think it's important to work. It keeps your mind fresh and keeps you on your toes.
That's right.
So I applaud that 97-year-old going for it. I hope to be that person.
You and I both.
What are some examples that an individual or a family member. Now, when people call or contact you, is it usually an individual or is it sometimes family?
Sometimes the family, a mother or father might call and say, hey, we're having some problems here. We don't feel like we're making any headway with vocational rehab. We feel like the wheels are just turning and they're not going anywhere, and here are our concerns. And so anyway, that can happen. And then I also have consumers that call me themselves. And the way that I handle that situation is because I'm separate from vocational rehab services, I have to have an information release form in order to talk with vocational rehab about whatever the concern is. Since they are serving that person, then I have to get their permission to contact vocational rehab services.
Gotcha.
And in order to get the case material, in order to know exactly what to do to help them. And so that's kind of what I do is when a person calls in, and you haven't asked this question, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into
Please.
it. When a person calls me, what happens next? We'll talk and we'll decide, okay, I'm going to go ahead and open a case. You've already tried to talk with the counselor, or you've tried to talk with the supervisor. That hasn't been beneficial to you. So this is what I need you to do. Let's go ahead and do an intake. And what I tell people, it's a real simple thing. I can take it over the phone if you'd like. Name, address, telephone number, those kinds of things. Disability, we need some demographics because I need that for my annual report each year.
Oh, yeah.
And or if they would prefer, we have a website, www.sacap.alabama.gov, that they can go online and they can go ahead and fill out the application right there, and it goes directly to me. Now, the only thing that doesn't go directly to me is I have to have that information release form. So they can print it out, they can sign it, and if they can scan it and send it back to me, I can get it immediately. We also work with the fax machines. Those are still handy. People have taken pictures.
I was just going to
and
ask, what
send
about
it. Yes,
Yeah.
I can take it in any form that they want to send it to me in. Even snail mail, that is still, there are some people that don't use technology, or maybe where they're living, the technology isn't working for them out there. And so we might have to snail mail it to them. And it sounds funny to me to say snail mail because that's what I grew up with. But that's what we're going to do because I have to get that information. But because of technology, most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, they can go ahead and we can fill out that application. We can get that information release form done that day. And if I'm on the road traveling, I can say you can either fill it out online or call my assistant, or I'll have my assistant call you, and let's get it going that way. So that it doesn't take a long time for my services to pick up and start. We try to be Johnny on the spot and get to them as quickly as possible.
Do you feel like most people call in a dire situation, or they're kind of looking ahead? And you say Johnny on the spot, that makes me feel like something is needed at this point, this week, or
A lot of times they're very frustrated, extremely frustrated. They have goals. They want to get somewhere. They want to do something, and they've been held back by a decision or no response at all, and they're really frustrated. They want to go to school. They want an answer. There are things sometimes that have to be done, and I know I've heard people say, well, I feel like I'm having to jump through hoops. Sometimes they are having to jump through hoops in order to vocational rehab requires certain things. In order to send people to school, they have to have documentation. They have to have things filled out. They have to have Pell Grant information filled out, and so there is a process of getting all of these things done. And so, if a consumer doesn't do things on their end, then vocational rehab can't do things on their end. And so, when you sit down and talk with someone, and they say, "Yes, I have done all that. I just can't get a response when I call my counselor. They don't call me back." And I'm really frustrated right now. And in very few situations, but I have done this when I've had some really angry people, I might go ahead and contact vocational rehab immediately and say, hey, let's go ahead and get a meeting in place while we're getting all of the paperwork in order so that because they're really frustrated.
Yeah, and you don't have to talk about anything in detail at that point.
No.
Just a heads up, hey, maybe next week or the following, let's get together
That's
and
right.
see. And I've seen that intake form online, and it's not very intimidating. It's pretty straightforward, and just tell us what you're having difficulties with and a little bit about yourself.
That's exactly right. And then I get the other information by talking with them and looking at the case material. Sometimes when I have a consumer that calls in, and after I've gotten the case material, I'm thinking, well, there's nothing in this case that shows anything that they're frustrated with. There's the counselor is not picking up on their frustration at all. And in a situation like that, you have to figure out, what's going on. Is the counselor just not understanding what's going on, or is the consumer just not expressing their needs or their frustration? You don't know until you sit down and start talking with both of them, and then you start pulling out information on both sides. And a counselor may say, "I didn't understand that at all." Consumer said, "Well, I said this. Well, that didn't lead me to think that." and so then when you start communicating, what you're hoping to do is build the relationship of the consumer and the counselor. And then my job is eventually to back off, and you hope that the relationship with the consumer and the counselor is stronger than what it was before, and that they're able to carry on.
And you mentioned jumping through hoops there. Sometimes it can feel like jumping through hoops, but those hoops you have to jump through.
Yeah.
And at some point it's like, hey, it's a struggle and it's a pain to do this, but by jumping through those hoops, you're able to communicate better sometimes. And everybody in your group that's with you and trying to get you to that goal you're going for, it'll be a stronger group.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one of the things I really like to, convey to the consumer, counselors really want their consumers to be successful. They really do. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way. And sometimes when I come in and I can say, your counselor is doing this, this, and this, and this, you may not see all the things that they're doing. But let me point out to you, they are doing these things, and they are wanting you to be successful. And sometimes that does make people feel a little bit better that, hey, maybe somebody does care about me.
Yeah. I originally thought, you're kind of keeping VR in check, but it's not really that. It's really bringing both sides together. Like if an individual is very frustrated with VR, sometimes it's pointing out that VR is doing a lot of good things for them. Maybe it just takes a little bit of time there, or maybe there's another loophole or loop that you have to jump through there.
That's exactly right.
What are some other examples, specific examples that somebody would contact you for?
Well, services are a big thing, and consumers will say, well, so-and-so got this. How come I don't get this? And, or how come the My VR counselor isn't telling me everything that I'm supposed to get? And what I have to explain to them is, every person that walks in through vocational rehab stores are different. And there are a lot of services that vocational rehab provides. And there's not just a checklist that says, okay, do you need this? Do you need this? Do you need this? What's supposed to happen, and I will say sometimes this does not happen, is that a counselor really needs to listen to what their consumers' concerns are. And when they see a need, they need to be there to say, well, why don't we try this? Maybe we can provide this. That's what needs to happen. And that doesn't always take place. And so that's when a lot of frustration happens with consumers, because they'll come in and say, well, I don't even know what I'm supposed to get. I don't know how I'm supposed to navigate this. I don't know how I'm supposed to get from point A to point B, and I don't know how to get there. And vocational rehab has toolboxes, and they have evaluators. A great resource that we have is Lakeshore Rehabilitation, and you may have already talked with someone from there. But they are all over the state. They provide great evaluations, and they'll spend time to get to know their personalities, find out what they want to do, find out some barriers that they may have, and how do you overcome some of those barriers. If a person wants to go to school and they're reading on a second grade level, that barrier is going to be very, very difficult for them to go to college. Okay. So that's a barrier. What can we do that, can we do some certification training? Can we do something similar to what you want to do? So we have to think out of the box at that point in time and think about, well, if that door is closed right now, what's another avenue? If you want to do this specific thing, what's another way that we can help you get there? Maybe if you want to be a nurse, but you really can't because of the reading level or something else, maybe you can be an attendant. Maybe you can go in and work with people and get a certification that way. So I don't think that you should just say, no, I'm sorry, you can't go to school, so therefore there's not anything that you can do. You can say, well, there's a block right here, so what can we do next?
Yeah.
And I think that is, I call saving grace, because if you just tell people no, they can't do something, and you don't give them another way to get around to doing something else, you're shutting them down.
Yeah.
And I do believe people are employable. I do believe all people are employable, even those with the most significant disabilities. Now, will it take time to work with people with significant disabilities? You bet it will. But I feel like if people are willing to go the extra mile, work with those people, then I think that there's an opportunity for them to become employed. It may not look like a, quote, and I put parentheses, normal person going and working 8 hours a day. It may be someone going in and working 2 hours a day, but at least they are contributing to society, and they are gaining independence, and they're doing something, and they're doing what they want to do. They are working.
That makes a big difference in anybody's life. Being able to contribute back to society, going home at the end of the day and say, hey, I did this and people enjoyed me being there for it. And that's compound interest. You do that for a week, a month, a year, and you're a totally different person.
And not only for that person with the disability, but sometimes for the, quote, normal people, having someone to come in and who really wants to be there and who really is wanting to work, that also shows to them, hey, look what they're doing. And maybe I need to give a little bit more than what I've been giving, because they're giving their all.
We had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Keith Richards at Tzatziki's earlier. Our first few broadcasts, and he was saying the exact same thing. And he, I think, employs 2 people with a disability per store in a lot of his restaurants. And he said, it's amazing that the change in the atmosphere, it goes from a business to a family. That's the individual is gaining experience and growing there, but they kind of take the group in a new and better direction.
That's right, because you're building natural resources for that person, and you're right. It does take on a family atmosphere at that point, and people quit worrying about their own concerns and start worrying about someone else.
Yeah. Now, when you meet with consumers, you say a lot of times there will be like a boulder in the road, and instead of saying no, it's here's a different path of how we can get to that goal. But defining that goal, I imagine you saying why like 10 times. Like, why do you want to go to college? Well, why do you want to do that? Well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to do that? Is that okay? So this is what you want to do. Well, here's a path of how we could get there. You could get there. So it's like asking why a bunch of times to get down to the root of what they really want to do.
That's exactly right. And sometimes it's just getting in there and digging into it and helping them to get to that point. But a lot of times it takes a team approach. It may take vocational rehab. It may take one of our rehab facilities working with them. It may take someone like Full Life Ahead that's working with them. It may take a lot of people who are coming in and helping that individual get from point A to point B. And I firmly believe in the team approach. And that's how I do it sometimes when we're meeting with consumers and vocational rehab. Pulling in anyone else is working with them. Let's say, for instance, I'm working with a person who has a visual impairment. We may invite someone who does mobility. We may have someone, there may be some other issues that we need to look at that makes a difference in their vocational rehab plan. So when you have access to all of the services that vocational rehab and the community offers, and you pull them all together and build that person up, it's kind of like a building block where this person, when you're sitting around the table and you said, well, we can do this and we can do that, and and you're building it up, and we need to do this evaluation, and we might need to do this, let's look at this natural support. And when you start doing this, everybody has a piece of the puzzle in order to make it complete. And that's what I get really excited about. Not just the fact that you have a person that comes in and wants to do something, but everybody's working together, including that person with the disability, saying what they want to do and how they want to do it. And then all of us putting our fingers together and kind of throwing that person up in order to help them succeed.
Now, do you see a lot of times a big difference in the individual from when you first started talking with them to maybe when you're no longer, working with them? Yeah.
I've only had an opportunity to see some people, because once I come in and we work through whatever the issue is, I don't always have access to that person any longer unless I see them. Now, I'm on the board of Full Life Ahead, and I work with a lot of individuals through it. And I see them grow from where they started, coming to camp at Full Life Ahead, and where they are now. And they're utilizing resources from the school system, vocational rehab, all the programs that have been provided to them, and also Full Life Ahead, all the things that they're teaching along the way. And I just recently was looking at a person who just graduated from high school, and to see where she started out and where she is now. Now she's getting into the employment sector, what comes next, and doing some training during the summer, and she's not going to go to college, but are there other things that she wants to do? Does she like working with people? But it's so awesome to see that she's able to take care of herself. She's more independent than she has ever been in her life. And it's awesome to see that.
I feel like a big part of that group coming together to support that individual would be a peer, someone that's gone through it before. Is that something that you try and get in every group, or you see around the state, is a peer support?
As far as I'm concerned, not always, where the client assistance program is concerned. And looking at Full Life Ahead, yes. And if I see an individual, a lot of times I may invite them to camp, to become involved with Full Life Ahead, because it's going to give them an opportunity to have that. But, that's a choice that they have to make. I can't, hit them over the head and say, you need to do this. I can't do that, but I can let them know the services that are out there that I feel like would be very beneficial to them. And I do offer that.
Yeah, I feel like as an individual, if I want to go somewhere, I want something to change in my life, I would knock on the door of somebody that's been there, been where I am currently, and has made that jump.
Yeah.
So I think that would be important for, any individual listening that is looking for supports as well, or, services there. Excuse me. The way that you mentioned some of the VR counselors reminded me of case management in developmental disabilities, ID, stuff like that.
Right.
So I kind of see that there. If somebody's saying, hey, well, how come I'm not getting these services, but my friend is getting these services? But you hit it on the head, I think, where it's not a checklist kind of a thing. It's a, hey, let's come in and figure out, what you really want and how we can kind of do that. So don't always compare yourself to what your buddy's getting, or, your family member or what have you, but spend the time to really sit down and figure out what your plan looks like.
That's right.
Yeah. If you could give us a couple of examples of somebody that would call in asking for assistance.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, I'll give you an example, and I tell you what I can't do. One time when I was in Birmingham, this was years ago, and I do go around to the independent living centers and the rehab facilities and talk with consumers that are involved in their programs. And I was sitting in a room waiting to see if a consumer wanted to come in and talk with me. And he comes running in and he says, I need to talk with you. And I'm thinking, oh boy, okay, what is it? He said, there's no women to date in Birmingham. and I said, well, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. Well, he was sitting there waiting for his best to come pick them up. So for the next 30, 40 minutes, we sat down and talked about the lack of opportunity to date. Well, there's not anything I can do in those types of situations. And I guess it just really depends on when a person calls in, and I try to get down to what they want, what their services are. And a lot of it is service oriented. I've been denied a service. I want to go to school, years ago, counselor could sign them up for school and send them to school, and everything was done a day before they went to school. Things are not done that way anymore. It takes months to get a person prepared. You have to make sure there's authorizations and there are different things like that. And so when a person comes in and they say, I don't understand why it's taking this long, it's because of the process involved in getting a person ready to go to school. A person also has to talk about what do they want to do and why do they want to do it. They have to write a paper talking about, are there any opportunities to go to school to do something like that? And we want to or vocational rehab wants to make sure that they are aware of some of the decisions that they're making. Now, when you have an 18-year-old, most of the time, they are not positive that they're what they want to do when they grow up.
I'm 32. I still don't know what I want to do.
Well, and an opportunity of going to school and doing the general studies and taking those kinds of things. And I do believe that the universities today offer classes that show some of those things. But that's why it's really important that when a consumer comes in and tells vocational rehab, hey, I want to go to school, it's important to have those evaluations. And an evaluation will show likes and dislikes and help lead them to maybe an area of interest for them to look at. And so that's the reason why some of those things take so long, is because it's a building block. But those are some of the concerns that I see. Other concerns with people calling in and saying, my counselor's not returning my phone call. I can't get a hold of my counselor. I can't get a hold of the supervisor. I've called, I've left messages, and I'm not hearing anything back. Now, sometimes people do indeed call, but if they don't leave a message, a counselor's not going to know that they've called. So it's very important that they leave a message, whether it be on email, whether it be on the phone. And if they don't call back in at least a week, give them a week. Maybe they're on vacation, maybe they're at a conference or something like that. Maybe ask to speak with the counselor's secretary and say, can I leave a message? Are they gone? Are they on vacation this week? Or when will they be back? Can you get a message to them and let them know that I'm trying to get in touch with them, that this is very important. I need to get a decision on this. Another thing that we look at is self-employment. People today, a lot of people are wanting to have their own business. And there's a lot of information that goes into setting that up, having a business plan, knowing who you're going to serve, when you do this. How are you going to make your money? How are you going to get there? And what help do you need from vocational rehab services? And you just can't go in and say, hey, can you give me $50,000 so I can start my business? You've got to have a plan. And sometimes you've got to run about getting ideas and understanding. Talk to people who have that type of business and to get ideas. How can I be more successful? What kinds of things, do I need a lot of technology? Can I get by on this until I can get things up and running? And so there's a lot of information that goes into requesting that type of service.
You mentioned that it feels like a lot of roadblocks. You said that a counselor could just sign somebody into college back in the day, the day before. And now it's a big process. Do you feel like those barriers, you kind of answered it along the way, but I felt like those barriers would hinder people from doing what they're doing? But you're saying that they're building blocks that will help you be better once you get there. Because
Right.
even though someone signs a paper and you got into college, now what? But if you've gone through those barriers, you've built yourself up and your supports and your community around once you do get into college there, you're ready for the next step.
That's exactly right. And in the colleges, they have disability support services. People need to be aware of that. They need to know how to access that information. And counselors need to say, you need to go and talk to disability support services. You need to let them know, give them the information. They have to provide psychologicals, because it lists the accommodations that are needed. That goes back to the evaluations that are done. And so that helps with the process of getting them to that point. And if there are services that need to be given to them, extended time, maybe a recorder, maybe someone taking notes for them, that's going to help them to be successful in school. And so therefore those things need to be in place. And that's the reason why today there is just not a quick thing. It's not a quick fix. And a long time ago, we didn't have all of the extra services that we've got today.
Yeah.
So it's to help those people be more successful, complete school, because how terrible is it to start school and then to fail? Not have the accommodations that you need, number one, but to fail, and then what do you do next?
And that kind of compounds there. You feel like a failure.
That's
and,
exactly right.
So you need those supports to make sure that you are a success there. How do you, or I guess I should say, your average length of time with a case once it's open, from open to close?
Boy, that varies. There have been cases that I have closed in one day that we have, I felt like an easy solution of just contacting the counselor and saying, I think you need to talk with them. I think that this can be solved. I may have opened the case, but after looking at the case material and all of that, I was able to say, hey, I just think you all need to sit down and talk through this, because I think you can handle this. I don't think you need me for this. And misunderstanding more than anything else. Then there have been, as soon as we sit down at the table and we talk about it, I may have had the case open a week. There have been times that I have had the case open for 2 or 3 years.
Now, what does that look like? What type of a case would be open for
Someone who may need more services, who may need more support. And sometimes when rehab comes in and works with a person, they may provide something, but then getting them to come back and do a lot of follow through with that person. And sometimes I don't feel like the follow through is always there. Okay, we've done this, yes, you've done that, but you need to do this consistently in order to help that person go to work. Supported employment, people who have more significant disabilities, it's harder to work with people who need long-term help. And sometimes people they feel like that, hey, I just don't think that we're going to be able to place this person. Well, let's look at all the services that you've provided. Let's make sure that you've pulled in as many resources to help you with that person. And so I may stay on board with that, because I'll try to rally the group together and say, okay, let's all sit down and talk about this. Let's talk about where they are right now. Let's talk about where we need to go with this. And I try to do it in a support and not in a negative way, because, consumers, number one, they need to know that vocational rehab is there to help them. They don't need to hear someone knocking vocational rehab. And the same is true for vocational rehab. They need to know that I am supporting them and helping them to think through from getting to point A to point B. And sometimes it takes a lot of minds to be able to do that. And so I don't ever want to point fingers at anybody and say, hey, you're not doing this correctly, because there's no one way to do something. And then when you get everybody in there working together, then you're going to be much more successful.
Yeah, you kind of want to take a team building camp for a weekend, then come back in and say, okay, now we're going to re-sit down.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
Let's go at it from here. You said that some of the cases will be for 2 or 3 years for somebody that has more greater difficulties there,
Right.
disabilities, and it takes them longer, and they need some more supports there. I have a family member that sometimes she'll be working on her goals, her yearly goals, for a month, or they may be 6 months, or it may be a year, but it takes her longer to accomplish some of the stuff. Sometimes it may take somebody else a day to accomplish that. Well, it's going to take her a little bit longer than that. So I understand that those supports need to be carried out continually. Yeah.
When you work with people with disabilities, and everybody has a different belief system, and if you look at a continuum, I'm probably on the one end that thinks that everybody can work, and that we just have to find the supports necessary and the services necessary in order to help that person. There are some people that are more in the middle and may have a difficulty in hearing what I'm saying when I say that. And then you have those people who are on the far opposite continuum that I'm on, and they may think, these people right here are the people that we need to work with, and these other people I don't think have the skills necessary. And I guess in a way it takes all kinds, because if everybody was the way that I am and think the way that I do, I'm sure that we would drive people crazy. But then again, if you have everyone who's not really seeking, digging in and really wanting to work with people and place them, I don't know that you want that type of counselor either.
Yeah.
And so when you can have someone who is balanced in that area, who is willing to try some things, then that's the way. That's when I think that there's going to be more success. And everybody just has a different way of thinking and doing things, and so therefore, I don't feel like I can point fingers. Mm-hmm. And it's important not to point fingers, but to say, what can we do to make this better?
Yeah, that's a really good point, that everybody's different and thinks differently. And it almost is like a matchmaking thing between the individual and the VR counselor. That if they're not on the same level, can you get a different counselor? Can you request?
Yes, you sure can. And a lot of times when we've sat down at the table, and I'll give this example, and this has been years ago, and it happened up in the Huntsville area. And the person that I was working with had a mental illness, and sometimes with medication, medication sometimes has to be changed with people, and it kind of throws you off kilter a little bit if it's not done the way it needs to be done. And this person, and I'll use her words, she said, I've gotten back on the wagon, I've had my medication redone, and I need to come back, and I really want employment, and I'm struggling. The counselor really does not want to work with me. And so anyway, we had a meeting with the counselor and the supervisor, and I was feeling really good about this meeting, and I thought, okay. And after we'd worked through some of the issues, and I looked at the consumer and I said, well, do you think you can still work with your counselor? And she said, yeah, I really think I can do that. I'm really ready to, I think we can whip this, and, I can get employment. And then I looked at the counselor and I said, do you think you can work with this consumer? And he says, no, I can't. And my stomach just dropped, and I was trying to be very cool and collective, and I said, and I was so upset, and my stomach was just twisting and turning, and all the way back from Huntsville all the way back to Montgomery, I was just fuming inside, and the supervisor was there, so we went ahead and assigned a new counselor and all that, and everything was good. But as I started driving back, and by the time I made it back to Montgomery 3.5 hours later, it dawned on me, that counselor did the best thing that he could have done for that consumer. For some reason, there was some reason that counselor just didn't feel that he was adequate to work with that consumer. Maybe she rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe there was something. Mm-hmm. And how would it have been had he continued working with her and not providing the services that she really needed?
Yeah.
And the communication not being there. And so then it dawned on me, gosh, Rachel, he did the best thing he could have done for her by saying, hey, I can't do this, and this is not going to be the best thing for her. He didn't quite say it that way, but that's really what he was saying.
Yeah.
And when I noticed that, when I realized that, I thought, yeah, he really did the best thing for her. So that is one situation where it was kind of severe, I thought. And then another situation where we've come in and, they have said, I don't want to work with this counselor. I don't like this counselor. And sometimes I've pointed out the fact that, your counselor really is in your corner. They're fighting for you, and they have done this, this, and this, and this, and they're, I really encourage the counselor to tell everything that they're doing to work with that consumer. And sometimes that doesn't happen, especially when it comes to job development. Sometimes, and I've done job development way back when, and sometimes you're going to different jobs and you've got the names of all the people in your mind and you're going through them, and so when you get back, you don't tell that person everything that you've done. And so therefore, if that consumer doesn't know that you've done that, out of sight, out of mind. They don't think you've done anything at all.
Yeah.
Well, I knew some of the things that this counselor had done. And so I was able to share, yes, they are in your corner. They're doing this, this, and this. There is still a procedure that has to be done, but they are in your corner. And that worked. That continued to work, and we were able to save that relationship. There have been times that says, no, I really just cannot work with this counselor. And so I'll look at the supervisor at that time and I'll say, can we change, counselors? And most of the time it's been granted. Now, if there's a consumer that comes in and they don't like this counselor, and then 2 months later they don't like that counselor, and 2 months later they don't like that counselor because they may say no, and rightly there's reasons that they're saying no to some things. There comes a time there's not any other counselors to give them, and they may have to say they're saying no because, and the next counselor that you get may say no also because rehab cannot do that. And so you have to let them know, I'm sorry, you either have to accept this counselor at this time because another one is going to say the same thing, or you'll have to not utilize vocational rehab services. So you kind of have to look the whole scenario of what the situation is at that time.
I imagine you're a very motherly figure, just coming in like, hey guys, it's okay.
Yes.
They've been doing this for you. It's working. It's taking a little bit longer. You've been doing a great job. Now let's come back to the table here.
Sometimes it's just somebody saying that. And I really think it's important to pat people on the back and tell them what they're doing. Now, I've also been in situations where it was not good. The counselor really had not done what she was supposed to have done or he was supposed to have done. And, it was very evident. And I let that speak for itself. I didn't have to say, why didn't you do that? That's not my job to do. And a lot of times the counselor would say, I really dropped the ball here and I apologize. I have had that to happen to for the consumer. And sometimes they were able to pick up and go on, and sometimes they weren't. It just really depended on that consumer.
How many cases do you think a VR counselor has at one given time?
Well, it fluctuates anywhere from 150 to 300 sometimes. And I know that occasionally they try to go in and clean out. And when I say clean out, for those consumers that are not responding to emails, that are not responding to texts or phone calls, or saying, if you don't come in and see me and you don't call and say, I've had to cancel or whatever, there comes a time that counselors need to cut out some of that because they're having to continue to do case notes on those people, and then it keeps other people from getting services because they're having to spend their time doing those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm part of a Facebook group, and they just did a cleanse there. They're like, hey, these people haven't responded to anything in 2 years. We're going to go through and boot you out of the group. You're just not doing anything. And then a bunch of people are like, I'm here.
I was listening, I just wasn't participating. And that's the thing right there, is that they're not participating in their program. And if they're not, then they don't need to keep the case open.
Now, how do you at SACAP engage with your customers? Is that mostly over the phone, or is it more in person or email? What's the the contact there like?
I do all of the gamut. You know, a lot of times I'll go to conferences where consumers are. I go to rehab facilities where consumers are. I give out brochures. Vocational rehab also talk about the client assistance program when they do intakes with consumers. Now, at that time, consumers don't always hear what they're saying.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there probably
Yes,
the first.
there is a huge amount of information, and they're happy at that very moment. And so sometimes word of mouth from another consumer, from another person in the agency say, you might want to call vocational rehab services. I've even had, counselors say, I have to deny you the service because my supervisor said no. Let me give you the client assistance contact information to call them and speak with them and see if they can do anything more than what I was able to do. And sometimes just sitting down at the table and brainstorming. And how can we do this? If that door is completely closed, and sometimes it's maybe a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a gray area, I can work real well with gray
Yeah,
area.
I might just bet the wind like blew it a little bit closed.
Yeah, that's right. And, there may be some things that the consumer has to do. There may be some things that vocational rehab has to do in order to make it work. So if it's doable, let's see if we can't make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And, but all of those, I have people email me, may be looking for something online and come across who I am and may fill out an application online. They may call. There's just a lot of ways, and we use all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Snail mail, we use fax, we use the telephone, we use the computer.
SMS text picture.
Yeah, and even working with the hearing impaired, I have signing skills. I communicate by sign language. And, and I love that. I love that I still have my signing skills because I started out working with the speech and hearing impaired and doing job development. And I love that I still have that connection with that population.
I think that's awesome. We had an opportunity to be at ADRS last week with Mr. Badarius Bell and Rocky Truman.
Yes.
Josh Brewer and Dan Putnam. I hope I said that all right. But that was an awesome broadcast. I really enjoyed that. I wasn't sure how it was going to work.
Yeah.
And I was really excited.
Rocky's a lot of fun, isn't he?
Yeah, he had me cracking up.
He's a character.
He had me cracking up.
Yeah.
Do you get questions? You mentioned independent living and VR are really the two main areas of focus for you. In independent living, do you get questions about self-directed services where the person is, maybe has some family help going on there? Or questions around SDS?
Sometimes, I don't have a lot of people that come out of independent living. I just don't. But if they call, I know a lot of people may contact me and say, hey, I need to file for my Social Security. How do I go about doing that? I can give them some information. I did try to fill out one time some papers for Social Security. I will not do it again. It's hard work. I will direct them and say, you really need to get a lawyer to help you with this would be your best bet to do that. But also vocational rehab has a program that helps people with that, with Social Security and also benefits, the benefit specialists. If a person is wanting to go back to work and they may not want to give up all of their service, all of their benefits because they're not going to work enough. They really need that insurance. They really do. And they might just want to work part-time just to give them a little bit of extra money because, Social Security, even though we pay a lot out in Social Security overall, it's not a lot of money to live on. And people want to earn a little bit of money to kind of do a few extra things or even just to live a little bit better.
Go to the movies once a month or something.
That's exactly right. And then also to be out in the community and feel worthy of being able to work and meeting other people instead of just staying at home and not having a life. And because I think that the majority of people don't want to just stay at home. They want more for their life.
Yeah, and if you're at home and you're just off SSI, whether that's a couple $100 or $700, that's still tough to make it.
It is.
And you're gonna be sitting at home, not working, wallowing about it. And maybe take a little bit of an SSI cut, work, and get some extra money there.
Right.
Yeah.
They can, and the benefits specialist can look at that, and say, okay, you can make up to this amount. If you make over that, then it's dollar for dollar, and they can decide what they want to do, but it gives them options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're not, their job at that point is just to find the opportunity not to make the decision.
Yeah.
That decision can come later, but let's get the resources together.
That's right.
What do you wish people asked more often?
Some of the things that I think is how can I communicate better? How can I communicate better with VR? How can I let them know really what I need, and guiding them how to, ask and get the services that they're wanting, and getting rehab to respond to them in a manner that help them really get where they want to go. People don't want just a job. Anybody can go and get a job at McDonald's or someplace like that where there's minimum wage, but people want more. They want a career a lot of times. They want financial stability. They want insurance and vacation. I want those things.
I do too, yes.
I want all of those things. And so why would we not think that other people would want the same things that we would want?
Mm-hmm.
And so they want the same things. I want to make a good salary. Why would they not want to make a good salary?
Mm-hmm.
And so this, that's the question that I would want to hear. How can we map out? And sometimes it's planning. What are the questions that I need to be asking? Instead of what can rehab do for me? This is what I want to do. How do I get there?
Yeah. Asking the right questions in communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it goes on both parts there. You said both for VR and for the individual. It's like a communication coach.
That's exactly right. Because rehab's not going to say, they'll say, well, here, let's just get you a job doing this. Well, that's not really what I want to do. Well, then what do you want to do?
Mm.
And, that's when you open up that dialogue. And that's when you get the evaluations. That's when you get all that other information to help plan and guide you. And it's kind of like a compass. It helps you to get where you want to be.
Is there a specific book, or what would you recommend for being a better communicator?
Oh, gosh.
Is there one that comes to mind there?
No, I really can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think for me, it's been experience. Learning to work with people, and sometimes get my hand slapped a time or two in the way that I've said something. May not come out exactly the right way. And I think that all of us have to learn to do that. I'm not what I was when I first started, 40 something years ago in my first job. And so you think about all the skills that I have obtained through all of these years and working with people and advocating for people and making sure that they get the services that they need and building people up. It is a process.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to read a book in a weekend and boom.
No, it's not.
You're good to go.
But now, Zig Ziglar, you listen to things.
Oh, yeah.
I like books on tape,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you listen to things and it sticks, and it helps you to navigate, and it helps you to think, I could say that a little bit better, and I can be more positive. I think that if I would tell anyone who's in this position here, and one day I will not be here, is to be positive. Try to do everything you do in a positive manner with vocational rehab and your consumers. Because if you're negative, you're not going to get anywhere at all.
Yeah, you're just going to stay in the same place.
That's exactly right. And you're really selling your consumers. And so if you're not doing it in the right way, you're not doing what's best for the consumers.
Now, from the family perspective there, would you also say communication is one of the biggest things that you would like to see more of?
Yes. And you have some families that really communicate well with their other family member that has a disability. They're helping them to get from point A to point B. And you also have some family members that really, are not interested in helping that family member, and they're kind of on their own. And those people are not able to succeed as well as others.
I read, I don't know who said it, and it may be way off, but the success of a child didn't really matter upon the income of the parents, but the number of books that were in the house. So kind of communicating and getting that information in there starts, at an early thing. And I think if the parents are very empowered in communicating and learning there, then the child has a greater opportunity, no matter their ability. That starts a little earlier there. So I almost feel like for long-term success, you'd want to go after the parents.
I think some, but I think advocating is right there with it, because parents who advocate for their children, who advocate in the school system, who advocate once they finish school and in employment, those that are out there advocating for them. And I've heard this from many parents, from the parents, they don't like to see me coming.
Yeah.
Now, I've always said you need to do it in a very nice way.
That was my grandfather.
Yeah, you need to do it in a nice way. However, it's important that you advocate, and I think that is right there with it, and because they have helped that person master those skills. They have been in the trenches with them, whether it's been learning to walk, learning to tie their shoe, and we take some of those things for granted, whereas for some individuals, that is really a huge accomplishment to be able to do that, to learn to use a communication device, and to be able to communicate in public. Those are huge things. And so anyway, those parents, I know that they mean well. Sometimes they don't come across well, but they do mean well, and they love their children, and they love that family member, and they want them to succeed. So you have to love them for that.
Yeah. By leading by example there, standing up and for what you believe in and what you see in the future.
That's exactly right. There's a girl that I was just recently working with, and she had written a letter to someone in the school system stating that she wanted to go to a regular classroom, and she felt like she was going to be graduating, and she wanted to do this, and the person she wrote the letter to heard her. And, she still needed some other services in the school system, but she heard her and she advocated for herself. And that's awesome.
Yeah. I want to give her a high five right now.
Yeah.
Don't even know you, but high fives through the camera. Are there any upcoming events or programs that you'd like to highlight for maybe some of your potential customers?
Well, like I said, I am on the board of Full Life Ahead, and we have camp coming up at the end of June, which is next week. And camp is already full, so we can't put any more consumers in there. Our next camp will be in November, and then February after that. But we do need some volunteers. If anybody would like to come and volunteer as a one-on-one to work in the kitchen, we have awesome food. And it is a great learning opportunity for someone who who is in this field, who wants to work with people with disabilities. It is an opportunity to not only work with a person with a disability, but to work with families. And you can see the whole circle of what the family's going through, what the individual's going through. We have speakers on all levels for adults, for young adults, for teens, and also we have a children's group because it's a family affair. Sometimes we need to have a place for younger children. And so I really ask if there's anybody out there that would like to volunteer. You will walk away just being so much more rewarded. Another thing that I'm involved with that I had mentioned is our Disability Expo. We just finished it. It'll come around again in April or May. We haven't decided on the month that we're having it next year. That's really awesome. We have books. If anybody needs resources, I have a book that has resources in it for the Montgomery area, but there are some other national resources that are in there as well. that they could utilize, vocational rehab, things like that, that they could still get wherever they are. So
Yeah.
if they need that kind of resource, I am more than welcome to give them that book as well.
We're going to be out at camp next weekend. So are you going to camp?
Yes, I will be there. I'm camp director.
We'll be out there, I believe, for Saturday, and it is a great camp. I think I've been 2 or 3 times before as a one-on-one. We're going to kind of be doing similar setup as this and see if anybody just wants to drop in and do a little TV show.
Oh, awesome.
And then probably do in the breakout sessions, not do it live, because I don't think we're going to get internet up by like the pavilion
Right.
or down by the the lake. So we'll just record that and make a video out of it later. But if you have the weekend free, or even if you don't, I would change plans. It is a great experience, and if you're going into the field, it's definitely a must. And even if you're already in the field, it's kind of a good refresher just to get reconnected, to the whole family for a weekend.
It really is, and it helps people to understand there's more there. There's a lot of things you have to consider when you work with people with disabilities, and when you have just one person come in, you don't know the whole story. You need to hear the whole story. You need to hear what's going on with the whole family, because it may be really hard, and there may be things that can be done if you just are aware of the situation.
Yep. So please, if you are listening, sign up for the Full Life Ahead camp to be a camp counselor, I'll say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Now we are kind of coming to a close here, and I would like to ask if there is anything that we haven't talked about that you feel is very important, or anything that you'd like to say.
Oh goodness, I think we've hit all the high points. I am happy to have this opportunity to let other people know about the Client Assistance Program. It is one of those things that people sometimes need, and they may not know about until they need it. And I encourage, if people do know about it, to let other people know about it. And because when they come in and talk with counselors, it's not that counselors, I think, are omitting that information. I just think it's so much information all at once that it just doesn't make sense at the time. So I hope that more people will take an opportunity. I'm the lowest level of mediation and advocacy, where we can get in and work with vocational rehab without, I say, ruffling feathers and trying to work it out at the table. So I really encourage people to use me.
Yeah. Snuff it out before it gets too big.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's not a big deal. Let's get back to the table.
That's
So-
exactly right.
Well, I've greatly enjoyed our time together, and I'd like to thank you for being here with us today. And if anybody's interested, once again, the website
Is www.sacap, that's SACAP, .alabama, spelled out, .gov.
and we'll go ahead and put the link in after we post the video here later today. At this point, we're going to go ahead and conclude our broadcast, and I'd like to thank everybody for being here with us today, and we will see you at Full Life Ahead Camp
Very good. Thank you, Alex.
next week. Thank you, and go ahead.